Dírí bechárda agus tá fáilte roimhsteach chuig an dara chlár de chuid na sraithe seo maidir le ranganna oíche Ghaelchultúr agus is mis Seán Ó Catháin tagas go an seo le Ghaelchultúr. So good evening everyone, and you are very welcome to the second program in this series about Gaelchultúr's evening classes. So my name is Seán Ó Catháin, I'm a teacher here. Agus an spruch atá leis na chláircha seo mar zólghríb ná an pobl a chur ar an ólas faoin á ranganna oíche agus na daoine is spreaga leis an Gaeilge a ólam nó feabhas a chur ar agóid na teanga. I mo chuideachta inniu tá spéisiúlta ain chun cur síos a thabhairt gríb maidir leis na ranganna tá déanta eici go dtí seo in Gaelchultúr agus sí sin Tarsila Krüse. Okay, so the aim of these programs is to inform you about our evening classes and to inspire you to learn the language or to improve upon your language skills. And this evening we have a very special guest for you, and she's going to talk to us about her experience taking Irish language classes here with us at Gaelchultúr. So allow me to introduce Tarsila Krüse. So tá fáilte rót, Tarsila.
Gur maith agat, is
Agus-
mise Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Is mise Tarsila Krüse agus is meise thóir leabhar de fáistín mé.
Oh, wow, ítach. Okay. So mar tusom is mar sin agus beidir a méarla an uair seo, Tarsila. So in English. So
Oh,
tell us about
yes.
yourself.
Yes, actually, it's better for me to say it in English because my knowledge is growing, but it's quite limited in Irish. So my name is Tarsila Krüse, for those who didn't get it, and I am a children's book illustrator.
Excellent. Okay. And Tarsila, can you tell us how you first became interested in learning Irish?
Well, that's an interesting journey because I've been living in Ireland for a very long time, and despite knowing that the language exists and it's practically everywhere, I didn't pay too much attention to it until I started working with my very first book, which was an opportunity that I received from an Irish publisher to illustrate a book, as Gaeilge. So when I became involved and started illustrating books in Irish, I realized that there was a part of that experience, and especially doing lots of workshops with the authors who write as Gaeilge. A lot of our workshops are bilingual. So I noticed that I was missing a big part of that interaction with the children that I was trying to communicate my visual stories to, and I was just missing out. So I realized that I wanted to be more in the culture and understand how these stories are told, because they are written as Gaeilge for little young Gaelchultúrs. So it's really a representation of this universe that is Irish culture, and I really wanted to be part of that.
Excellent. Fair. That's totally fair. And what about your knowledge of the Irish language prior to arriving in Ireland? Did you have any knowledge at all?
None whatsoever.
Fair.
None. No. I knew like Ireland, maybe they speak Irish. I know they speak English, but then, you learn and you get here, and the first comparison that you do as someone who already speaks a different language and comes upon English and say, well, maybe if these two languages live in the same country, that they are somehow close to each other. And if you go from English to Irish, it's completely disastrous because you don't see those similarities. But once you start learning Irish, you understand exactly why people in Ireland speak the way they do. And it is because a lot of it comes from the Irish. So even the names of the places, Irish is quite descriptive. So a lot of place names would be named after, would be named in Irish, and then they would have some sort of funky, weird translation in English, something that doesn't exist. But it comes from there. So it's fascinating.
And let me see, in terms of acquiring a knowledge of the language and motivation, why did you decide to study with Gaelchultúr?
Well, again, I'm involved in sort of languages. So my son used to go to Portuguese lessons, and this is because my native language is Portuguese. I am from Brazil originally. So he was going to these classes, and one of the parents there, he used to be a teacher at Ghaelchultúr, and I was showing him my work as an illustrator. He's like, "Oh, that's in Irish," and I said, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, yeah, I teach Irish," and I was like, "That's fantastic." And he's like, and I told him I would be interested in learning, and he said, "Oh, I know the right place, and I think you're really like the courses are really good there, so I really recommend it." And that's how I got to know about Ghaelchultúr.
Excellent. And how many courses have you completed so far?
So far, I've completed about 4 terms
Okay.
of the courses, but I did repeat some of them. I did Burunga Hain and Burunga
Mhm.
Do, and I did them because I didn't feel confident enough to move to the next level.
Fair.
I understand my I really like languages, so I do understand some of the limitations I have with the language, and for me to feel confident enough to move into a level that requires, say, full instructions as Gaeilge, I'm not quite ready yet, but
Hmm.
I'll get there eventually,
Of
slowly but
course.
surely.
Yeah. Sure, but it's all with practice.
It is all with the practice, and I know that because I have learned English and I have
Hmm.
learned a couple of other languages, and I know that it takes constant practice, and it takes being aware and using the language in your everyday to make it that priority. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I will definitely get there.
Absolutely. Excellent. And what did you enjoy most about the courses here at Gaelchultúr?
What I enjoyed the most about the courses is definitely the rapport that exists between teachers and students.
Uh-huh.
I have, like I said, I've studied a few languages, and being in like in a language, sorry, in English, it's a habit, in a language speaking school, like in a language school. You can have all the facilities, you can have everything, but if you don't have a good relationship with your teachers or with your peers, it's
Mm.
very hard for you to come back, because if you don't connect with the people that are in the class, or if you don't connect with what's going on, and if the teacher doesn't create an atmosphere that is inviting to learn, then it's really hard. So that is what I enjoy the most, and that's why I
Right.
kept coming back.
Okay. And what sort of topics would you have covered in class then?
Okay, so first day of class
Hmm.
of beginners, you learn how to say hello.
Of course.
And you learn how to say it in 3 different dialects, which is very daunting, because when you learn in English, you just learn like "Hello, how are you?" So and but then you get grips that there are those little differences, but it's not that daunting. Um, so we learn how to introduce ourselves. We learn how to describe people's appearances, hobbies, how to order things. So, really practical everyday things that you
Hmm.
can put in practice. So, because of the level that I've done, and I've learned those little things like saying "Tasha go just bullalat"
Hmm.
and things like that. They're really handy, especially like for me to speak to the people that I do in a professional context.
Of course.
They're really suitable for that. So even though they don't expect me to write a full-on email in Irish, I can always reply and say things like that. Oh, when I meet people, I can say "diaquit" or dismuragwit or diayiv, like, and know that I'm talking specifically to specific people in different
Mm.
ways, and for just the small things. And I find that um, Gaeilgeoirs, or even people who do speak a little bit of Irish, they really appreciate
Mm.
when a foreigner like me makes an effort, because it's not everyone is proud of speaking it, but the people who do really love
Yeah.
it. So everyone is really open and welcome for everyone to speak it. So
Okay.
yeah.
That's great. And in terms of resources, then, um, did you what sort of resources would you use in general in your learning of Irish?
Okay, so personally, I use the class materials, and when
Hmm.
I'm not in class, I would have a good old like a hardback Irish English dictionary, so
Ah,
I could look word things up. Like I find that I also use online resources, but I fix the content better if I have to physically look it up and
oh,
write
fair.
things down. And also my notes, I sometimes write a couple of like create my own homework in a way. I add a couple of like sentences from the things that I practice so I don't forget them.
Okay.
But I also use Tianglan.
Very good.
Duolingo, and occasionally Google Translate when absolutely in desperation.
Only then.
Yes.
Okay. And in terms of practicing what you've learned, have you had much of an opportunity to do that? So we say beyond the classroom and beyond learning resources, have you had much of an opportunity to speak Irish?
Yes. What I find though is when I leave classes, I just want
Hmm.
to go to like a cafe the next day or somewhere, and I want to speak to people in Irish. I mean, I
Hmm.
am in the right country for it, but not everyone is a Gaeilgeoir, so you just can't
Yeah.
assume. But I'll give you an interesting thing. The other day, I was in the pharmacy, and the lady that was next to me said, "Oh, Gormahagat," and the person behind the counter said, "Oh, Slán, Fáilte Road
Okay.
Slán." And I was like, "Oh, Gaeilgeoirs." And then I started to engage a little bit in that conversation. So I realized that the guy who works there, the pharmacist, he is a Gaeilgeoir, but obviously I
Oh,
didn't know and I couldn't guess.
I
So
see.
that was nice.
Hmm.
But like I said, I'm a children's book illustrator. In 4 of my books, I have 7 books published, and 4 of
Hmm.
my books are all Gaeilge. So I speak with my authors and with the editors that I work with, as much as I can, all Gaeilge. And I try to incorporate, because, like, you know, the more you use the language, the better you get at it. So,
Of
like we said,
course.
it's like exercise, and
Hmm.
so I try to use it as much as I can, even if it's a tiny little bit. I use the ATM machine in Irish
Good. Good.
because, like, and if you try it, I highly recommend it. And if you panic, just remember that the buttons are the exact same place. So
Makes sense.
even if you can't read, your muscle memory will kick in, and like,
Okay.
and I feel very proud when I when I do that.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
The
and
more you
one last
know.
thing, sorry, and one last thing. My son goes to a Gael school, so
Hmm.
he started school this year, and he goes to a Gael school, and I try my best to speak to all the Munchery Gaeilge as well.
Ah, wow. Ítach. Very, very good. And do you plan to take on or to do more classes in future?
Oh, absolutely.
Good.
I find that, well, working and practicing Irish on my own has its benefits, but I
Hmm.
find that a class and a structure really gives you that push. And
Of
like
course.
I said, if you have the support of a teacher that can explain things to you. So before I enrolled in classes, I was taking Duolingo, and I
Hmm.
had to do a lot of the grammatical associations in my own head. I didn't
Hmm.
see the pattern as clearly. So to me, like, Duolingo is a great tool if you want to brush up on your Irish, but
Hmm.
maybe is a little bit harder if you have no idea how the grammar works.
I see.
Um, so picking up the course was really important for me. So I want to keep going
Hmm.
because, like I said in the beginning, I felt like I was missing out. My ultimate plan is to be able to facilitate workshops in Irish. That's
Excellent.
like my
Okay.
ultimate goal. Yes.
Great. Okay, very good. And I suppose, would you recommend Gaelchultúr's classes?
Oh, absolutely.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Good.
I think that for the foreign national,
Hmm.
if you're a person who has no foundation of Irish whatsoever, or maybe you have a bit of Duolingo,
Hmm.
or if you haven't really studied and you're like, "Oh, I'm in Ireland, I'm going to learn Irish, sounds like fun," I'd say give it a shot.
Okay.
Come with an open heart, and
Fair.
remember that, that your grammar, the grammar of your first language, is completely different to English, or at least somewhat different. And
Hmm.
you will find that, because
Yeah.
languages are all about a representation and a vision, like a cultural vision of the world. So it's how
Yeah.
people see the world and understand the world. And obviously, the Irish were here before English came along, so that has that thing as well. So come in and knowing, like, I find Irish much closer to Portuguese in grammatical terms,
Oh, interesting.
um, even though than to English. So even the structure is a little bit similar. Obviously, Portuguese doesn't start with a verb like Irish does,
Hmm.
but the conjugation of the verbs, a lot of the tenses, I can relate those things in my own language. And I know I'm saying a lot of like specific terms, but you don't even have to know these terms
Oh,
to
yeah, it's
be
true.
aware of how the language is being used. You
Mm,
understand that in your language you have different tenses that don't exist in English, and
yeah,
vice versa.
of
So
course.
if you come from that background, I'd say come with an open heart, enjoy, have fun, learn a few sentences, use
Good.
it, and people will go like, "Oh my God, that's amazing!" And then you get more encouragement to keep going. And
Absolutely.
if you already have some Irish, if you studied in school and it's been years, or you were what's it called when you're in school and you don't have to take the Irish classes?
Oh,
Um,
when you are
Wait, do you know
exempt?
when? Yeah,
Yeah.
exempt. So if you've been exempt and you think you're missing out, or if you have studied or enjoyed it and haven't seen it in a while, I found that with the people I studied with, they picked it up really, really quickly.
Ah,
So it was all in their brains, and they were like, "Oh, now that makes sense."
mm,
Things like they've heard, but they really didn't know how it was structured or how we worked in a certain context.
okay.
Maybe, they learned a couple of phrases, a couple of vocal, and they were like, "Oh, I know this or I know that." But,
Mm,
and they pick up very quickly. And I find they move to other stages or to other levels quite quickly as well, because
okay.
um, they have different vocabulary. Like I had no vocabulary. You could not ask
Mm,
me what a table was. I could never tell you what a table was
yeah.
before. But an Irish person who's seen Irish before knows exactly what the word for table is, or the word
Mm,
for light, or the word for door.
mm,
So yeah, those things are. So I recommend either way, because I find that is a nice experience. And
okay.
yeah,
Okay, a very positive note on which to finish then. Thank you so much, Tarsila.
well, thank you.
Okay. Well, a chuirde ba mise arás an teachtain se thugann, agus chuirme aglah ar bhaclainn eile dar gcuid le blaisiúirt riomh haithí an ólamóra. So can you súlan meán hóisiiltha don óla sin ar fad. So I'll be back next week and I'll be interviewing another former student of ours to give you a taster of the learner's experience. So you just keep an eye on our social media pages for all that information. Tarsila Arish gur míle míle maithaga. Thank you so so much. Okay.
Gurvahaga. Culture
Agus
Road.
anhair fad ítach agus well a chuirde feice an tatan se thugann sibh gur maithaga arís agus slán go fóil.
Slán go fóill.
Slán.